we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Another episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats. This week, we have a break from all the game developers, talking to Tom Ohle from Evolve PR about a very important part of shipping, releasing, promoting your game is the PR side of things, which a lot of us indies tend to overlook. And I know we walk out with a very bad battle strategy on our own, but Evolve PR is and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but you are an agency that handles public relations for a variety of games. I know you have been in the business for a heck of a long time. Way back when I used to be a journalist, we had some correspondence. So give us a more of what you guys do.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. Thanks for having me. I mean, finally, publicists and marketers get our time to shine, right? That's exactly what we need more of, right? So Evolve is like we are a PR agency, I think, first and foremost, but at the same time, our kind of goal, I guess, mission as a company is to kind of help developers, publishers of pretty much any shape and size, wherever we can. So, I mean, we started the agency, my wife and I, like 15 years ago now, 2006. Yeah. So, it's been a long time. Within the last few years, we sort of expanded a little bit from doing media relations stuff to doing social media and community management. We're doing trailer production now. We have a platform at terminals.io to kind of help as a tool technology base. And we have a research team, just because, like, as we'll probably talk about, it's not really all that easy to just get press and influencers or whatever interested in a game. There's just so much more that has to happen. It's a lot of community development. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket. So that was kind of what we wanted to make what we were doing. Because things were getting so fragmented, I think, in the media space, just so many games. I mean, anybody who's made a game at this point has realized like how noisy it is out there. That was sort of something we really wanted to be able to address, because not everybody can get media coverage, or not everybody can get top influencers. You're not going to necessarily be top 10 games streaming on Twitch every time. So you have to have other plans. You have to have other options. But that's basically, we try to help as many different clients as we can. We work with everyone from kind of indie studios up to AAA stuff. Just whatever kind of floats our boat, whatever is interesting, where we think we can help is kind of what we want to try to do.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things that I think I'm most curious about and find most interesting about the agency model, as opposed to hiring an individual PR person within your studio and letting them handle everything, is the breadth of titles you get to experience, and the different communities you get to touch, with that portfolio. I wanted to talk about, back when I my experience with PR was always, hi, I'm a journalist, I'm interested in game XYZ. You're the gatekeepers to any information that I might be able to get access to as a journalist. I want to write about the story. I want to write about this game. I'm passionate about it. I'm interested in it. How has that most changed in the past 15 years, 10 years, from being PR being these like sort of gatekeepers to now the role that it is now?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. I think that I think maybe it was a bit of serendipity or just like total fluke that we called the company Evolve. It really has become, I think, like crucial to what we do and how we operate. It's kind of central to our entire business at this point, because when I started, I started the agency 15 years ago. I started 20 years ago, I guess, is when I got my job at BioWare. It's been a long time at this point. I'm aging myself pretty horribly there. So, but like when I the first game I worked on was like the expansion or Throne of Ball expansion to Baldur's Gate 2, and then Neverwinter Nights. And at the time, you could be like, I'm going to send out 3 new screenshots for Neverwinter Nights, right. And there were like 50 outlets that you would be hitting, like there weren't that many media outlets that you would cover, and everybody's like, everybody covered it. So it was pretty much like all you had to do to get media coverage was just push news out, and the fact that you were doing it, people were like, whoa, a game, and then they just like write about it. Whereas now, I mean, the last 2 years have been like 9,000 releases on Steam every year and stuff. So that just that noise has been, I think that's been a huge change. At the same time, I think media influencers as well now are so they're basically just so driven by traffic and trying to make sure that they're earning revenue that it's so much now for a media outlet or an influencer to just cover whatever's going to get them clicks, whatever's going to get them views, or whatever their audience is there for as well. And that makes it a lot harder for a game that doesn't necessarily have a lot of clout to come in and get attention. It's just you kind of, it's like a weird kind of chicken and egg scenario where you kind of need buzz behind you to get attention, and you need the attention to get the buzz. It's a little that definitely has been a huge change, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that we've noticed definitely has happened within the industry, the sort of snowball effect of in games where because a game is popular, it becomes exponentially more popular. I'm curious then how, as a PR agency, how do you get those first few snowflakes clumped together to start pushing it down the hill? Does the idea of it being a popularity proposal come into the package, or?
Yeah. And I mean, I think there are a lot of different ways you can end up kind of approaching it on the PR side. Like, I think anytime you come into marketing your game, you really, it kind of goes back down to fundamentals. You're like, okay, I have, a certain game, I have certain parts of it that will appeal to people. I've got like a specific target audience in mind. And you need to connect those things. I think that the way that I talk about it with our job as in PR specifically, and I think it goes out into the community elements and stuff like that, is that our job really is to be, especially amid all this noise, is to take games that are worth something. I mean, games that people will want to play, and find the right people to connect it with. That to me is ultimately our big job, because you can't sell people on something they don't want. So really we have to go, let's take this game, who it's gonna appeal to, and if we can get the people who are most interested, that the specific target market that you're hitting. So if it's like, if you're working on a strategy game, you have a specific audience, and if those people love the game, chances are you have a good opportunity to start building some attention. Whereas if you can't get 1,000 people to love your game, right, you're not going to get 1 million people to love it. So I think that that's part of it, is just trying to highlight the game to the right people and hope it sticks. But it's tough. Like for us, a lot of times the challenge right now is just you get somebody on the media side who's getting 50, 100 emails a day. Just trying to get people to open an email is a hard enough challenge. So then getting them to spend the 2 minutes to watch a trailer, getting them to, play a demo for half an hour, to get them to come out to an event, things like that, it just doesn't happen as easily. So I think some of it comes down to that community development. And you see a lot of games that succeed without media coverage. I think it's almost, if you look at the Steam charts for sure, it's almost an exception that you're getting like extensive media coverage. It's like a lot of, AAA stuff or games from really well-established studios. But for every one of those big games that's succeeding, you get a dozen others that are just kind of bubbling up through wherever, And I think that trying to figure out where that's happening is a big challenge for a lot of marketers right now. And it's like some of it's happening on Reddit, or it's like on Imgur, or it's on Twitter. Now TikTok, there's a lot of people that are getting pretty good traction there. Steam forums, who knows, Itch. There are a million different places where you can get attention, and so that's an opportunity as well as, I think, a bit of a hurdle, because there are so many different places it could happen. It's really easy to get overwhelmed and be like, well, where should we be?
Right, right, right. So it's wherever that core base community can foster itself, and that first 1,000 people who really love the game sort of like glom onto it and stay attached. As a
Yeah,
oh sorry, as an agency, you guys have I guess sort of the opportunity to pick and choose projects that you want to work on. You get I assume you go hunting for projects, but you also get a lot of pitches for projects. And how much of a factor does having that, the studio coming with that sort of audience or that sort of attraction to the game before they even, put out a media release, how much does that play into the decision?
yeah. I mean, I think that for what it's worth, I think every agency or every company that you or individual that you bring in would probably have a different approach to how they make these decisions. I think for us, we have a pretty good sized team. There's like 25 of us now. So we can handle a pretty sizable portfolio, I guess. And at the same time, we actually kind of have to, because we have a big enough company that we kind of like have to keep pushing things. But at the same time, it doesn't really do us much of a service. It doesn't do our clients much of a service um, to say, yeah, let's work on this project if we don't think we can really make an impact with it. So I think it's not so much saying, are you coming in with an audience already, or are you coming in with a known IP, or do you have a established development studio or something like that? It's less about that and more like, for us, it's a little more intangible, where certainly those things help, where if we can say, okay, you've developed games before, they were big hits, it's relatively easy then to get that media coverage, to get attention from influencers, to build a community, whatever. Same thing with known IPs. It's like you come in with a Baldur's Gate, you can get coverage. It doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter what you're making. You have that IP attached. It's easier to get that. But for us, it's like, if a game is great, basically we have to be excited about something. And I think everybody on our team plays games and loves games. So if we're not totally stoked to play a game, we're probably not going to take it. But at the same time, we also have to kind of be realistic and think, even if we're interested in this game, if you come to us as a developer and you're like, hey, I got this really obscure like match 3 puzzle game, and I want to hit 1 million units sold on Steam in the first year, like, I mean, it's a bit of a challenge for us to dive into that, right? Because we're just, I don't think that your expectations can really be matched or met by the service that we provide, or at least we don't really know or think that we can make a huge difference. So at that point, it's probably better to take a different approach, or maybe we're just not the right fit.
Right. I mean, whether the developer comes to you guys with an audience or not, I would like to begin the process of demystifying the money aspect of it. I mean, PR work is not free. And that's where I feel a lot of indie developers have started taking on the role themselves. We self-manage all of our own PR because we are too poor and cheap to handle any of that. And the results show, right? We only have so much capacity in between making games to do our own marketing and outreach. So what are the sort of financial barriers, and how do you guys work with studios who have less, or how does that shake out? If you do see, assuming you see it's a game that you like and you think you can make a difference
For
with.
sure. Yeah, and I mean, ultimately it is going to vary by agency. It's going to vary by territory. There are a lot of different factors. It depends on sort of the overall scope of how we're involved. I think in most cases on the agency side, you're paying for hours spent. You're paying for time, essentially, right? So the more you need done, the more attention you need, the more you can't do yourself, the more it's going to cost ultimately. From our perspective, our company is really like, we built the company with the goal of trying to help developers of like really any shape and size. So we work with projects that are 1 and 2 person indie studios, and we launched Cyberpunk and work with, all sorts of AAA teams as well. So we really try to be adaptable and try and find options and opportunities to help different size developers, different budgets. But it really varies. I mean, so for us, we've always wanted to make sure that we can, if an indie game came in and it was like just an amazing game, but we don't really have a budget, we'd probably rather do something with that game on a low budget instead of saying, "Nah, let's not work on it. It's not worth our while," because it helps us to get games that are good into our system, especially with our platform like terminals. We rely on good games for people to come and be interested in the platform in general. And for example, we work on Cyberpunk. So somebody would come to the page, be looking for Cyberpunk, and at the same time, they're discovering other projects that we're working on. It just kind of helps in that way. But so through terminals, we have some options for indie devs that are basically like $1,500 and $2,500. These are what we call launch packages. And they are essentially, they're really low effort. So it's not like you're hiring Evolve and we're coming in and we're going to run this big campaign for you. It's a way to tap into our network for us to handle key distribution. And that's basically it. So that's our super low budget option. And is there really, I would say, for studios that either don't have a budget really at all. And I know even for some really small hobbyist developers, even $1,500, $2,500, still a sizable budget. But it is what it is. So it's either people who don't have a budget at all, or folks that just want to kind of amplify the message, get their games out to a different audience that maybe they can't reach themselves. So like through terminals, I think we have about 25,000, 30,000 media and influencers that are in that system. So it's kind of a nice like option. But beyond that, basically for us, we have a bunch of different ways to work. And I think a lot of other agencies work in different ways. So there's like kind of this retainer model, which would be a monthly fee. You're basically hiring an agency that is going to work for you every month. It doesn't necessarily make sense for a lot of single game indie devs, especially because you're not constantly talking about the game, or especially on the press side, you're not really doing this like ongoing effort. So it doesn't necessarily make sense, but we do campaign budgets as well. So we'll basically say, all right, for the next year, we'll work on your game, and overall, this is the budget. But they can really vary, So for us, there's like a minimum fee of $10K for those full campaigns through Evolve. And that's basically just to make sure that we can learn about the game, that our team can really understand it and try to not just be, we don't want to just kind of phone it in and be like, all right, bring it in, let's ship it out and keep moving. So it allows us a little bit more time to become familiar with the game, get to know the teams and stuff like that. But that's something that we do those campaigns and spread them over 2-3 months. So it's not so bad as you're heading into launch, but even then, a 2 or 3 month campaign really means that either your game is going to do gangbusters and like be so good that as soon as we start talking about it, it's going to blow up, or you already have to have a fair bit of attention before you come in at that stage. But other than that, you could end up having clients that are up to like 10 grand a month, just because they have many games that you're working on or something like that. So you're constantly staying busy. But for most indie devs, I think, there is always that kind of, I don't know, common knowledge or something, that's kind of best case scenario that you're spending, anywhere from 25 to 50% of your budget on marketing. Right. I don't think that happens in the indie space all that often. No. Is fine. But so that's always a good guideline. If you can hit that, great. But for the most part, I'd say we're dealing with budgets anywhere between 10K and 50 grand for like a year-long campaign. But that's already getting into fairly sizable projects, kind of AAA kind of stuff, or whatever you want to call it. So it really varies by the project and depends on the work, right? So our trailer work is billed totally differently. I mean, trailers could be anywhere from $3,000 up to 100. If you ended up hiring, a lot of really big animation studios and stuff, they're not even going to pick up the phone for under 50,000.
Right.
So we're a little different. Again, we try to be able or try to adapt as much as we can and offer different models. But it depends on the developers, right? So in some cases, we're also like, let's say with social media support or community management, it's like, on a very basic level, it's, hey, we need somebody who can actually just respond to our community so we can focus on development. That might be half an hour a day or something like that. It's really not a significant expense. So in that way, the agency model can sometimes make more sense than, let's say, bringing somebody internal. If you're hiring a full-time community manager, you're paying a full-time salary, and you don't necessarily have to do that on the agency side, but it comes with its own kind of downsides too.
Right. I'm curious to talk about terminals in a little bit, but for those studios who do decide to forego any sort of budget in marketing or NPR, where do you think that they're going to struggle the most? I mean, or if they're like us and they're just can't afford to throw any money at it, don't want to throw any money at it. Where are they going to struggle the most, and how is partnering with an agency going to change that picture?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm probably a really shitty salesman for myself sometimes because I think that you don't need an agency. You don't need to have somebody who's doing it. I think that a lot of times, media and influencers will respond more have a more positive response to developers doing the outreach. I think where the challenge comes in is developing long-term strategy. I think is a challenging one. So really going in and saying, all right, we're launching a game in a year. How do we get from where we are now to where we want to be?
Right.
At the same time, I think we're in a bit of a kind of post-relationship economy in a way, because it really does come down to show me something cool and I'll be interested. I don't care who it is, but fact is we have a contact database of 30,000 people that the average indie dev who's coming in, especially for your first or second release or something like that, you just don't have those contacts. So trying to build that network up, I think, is a challenge. And beyond that, I mean, I think there's just this inherent sort of knowledge about how to pitch a game when, trying to understand when the different opportunities are to get attention, what's realistic and what's not. And to try and elevate, I think one of the challenges that I've seen with a lot of studios that try to do it themselves is if you're taking the wrong approach for your game, like if you're trying to rely on press coverage, for example, for attention on an average indie game, it's not going to happen. Like you might get a little bit, but even if you get that attention, it's not going to drive sales. It's not necessarily going to make a huge difference for you. So where we might come in and go, you know what, let's be honest, I don't think that you're going to get extensive IGN coverage or whatever it happens to be. So while we can try to do that, let's try to make sure we have a different strategy and try to do something else. But you know what, like I think especially in the last few years, it's been pretty clear that there's no right or wrong way to announce, launch, publicize, attract attention for a game. You've seen, I mean, there have been a million different examples of all sorts of different things where, some games will succeed because they did a great press push and then eventually got their influencers. They did a good marketing campaign. There are others who maybe just had a great influencer. Everything just took off because streamers were playing the game. Right. Others where they just took off on Reddit. Others where they posted something on Imgur and it went viral or whatever and took off from there. There's no right or wrong way. I think what we try to bring to the table is at least, I guess, a sense of historically what works or what has worked or what maybe doesn't work, and just kind of maybe a reality check in, I think, in a lot of cases. And then just being able to have a network of people that we go, okay, you're working on a turn-based strategy game. I know who we should talk to. But at the end of the day, those same people, I can only go to them so many times and say, I really think you should cover this game before they go, but you just told me that about the last game and the last one before that and the last one before that. I can't like constantly go out on a limb. So that's the other challenge is, we do have to represent a lot of different clients over time. So you may have some challenges there. Whereas if you're internal or you're the only person at your company who's doing the pitching, you can just find the right people and just chase them, and chances are they'll be interested. Or I mean, if the game's a good fit for them.
It's interesting because I do agree with you. A lot of developers tend to get very stuck in a sort of classical mindset of the path to promotion. We all grow up as gamers. These are the news sources we read. We expect to see our games represented in these outlets, even if it's not necessarily the right path. And it's I guess there is something significant to be said about the out of box thinking and strategy that goes into promotion through the agency model. But you touched on the relationship economy and the that's always how I've understood PR and journalists when I've been on both sides of the equation. Is this a popular area? How does the relationship aspect come into things? What makes a good PR person good at handling all these relationships, as opposed to
I mean, I may not be the best person to talk to that, just because like I think, I don't know, I've always felt that, I mean, maybe even as an agency overall, we've been a little bit on the outside of things. We're a Canadian team, for the most part. And so in that way, we've always, like, I've never been much of a networker, and I've never been, I've always been pretty introverted and not really the person to go out and try to sell ourselves and things like that. So I do think after 20 years of doing this, you start to realize how, I guess, ethereal, I guess, the industry is a little bit, and how the relationships within it. You get a lot of people coming and going. Today, I may spend all my energy getting the editor at GameSpot to cover a game. 2 years from now, they're working at Riot or something like that, and I have that entire time I spent building that relationship is out the window. Well, not out the window in terms of obviously there's still a reason to have relationships, but from a press standpoint, you're like, okay, there's always this fresh crop of people coming up, and at the end of the day, like I said, their job is, at least for the most part on the media side, is to get clicks, to write content that they think is going to be appealing to their audience. And so from that perspective, I think I've spent a lot of time pitching people that I know very well, and they will still ghost you on a response because they don't want to turn you down. They want to be nice, but they're just going to ignore you because it's not right for them, even though I may really believe in a game, even though I really want to say, hey, you should pay attention to this. And maybe that's, again, because we are still a little bit on the outside here at Evolve. We're not necessarily, if we were maybe in San Francisco or something like that, and that's even less of a thing now because everybody's working remotely. But when there are kind of hubs of activity, maybe it's more important that you're like, hey, I have had a beer with this person every weekend or something like that, and then it feels a little over friendly maybe in that way. But from my side, like, I've pitched lots of press who've never heard from me before, and they'll bite on that story and say, this sounds good, let's write about it. And I've pitched a lot of people that I've never or I've met 100 times that ignore my emails, right? So I think that the relationships are nice, but you can't leverage them in all cases. And a lot of times, again, it just comes down to brass tacks. It's like, what am I getting out of this? And I think you see it a lot of times where people will be working on the media side, and they're, at a major top tier outlet, and then they move on to some smaller, lesser known thing, or they go on to start their own site or something like that. And then suddenly nobody cares about pitching them anymore, and it works both ways, right? So it's a lot of I do think the industry has this very strong sort of what have you done for me lately, or like who am I and who are you now, what can you do for me sort of thing. Everybody's, but we only have a certain amount of attention, we only have a certain amount of time we can devote to this stuff. And I think right now with social media overall, individual relationships I just think are getting weaker and weaker. It's just hard to be friends with 3,000 people on Twitter and actually have a good relationship with them.
It's the natural entropy of the universe at work. It's weird because like I don't think there's many sectors apart from game creation that have so much emotion involved in, like, especially in the interpersonal side. I specifically remember a lot of times when I was a journalist, that relationship factor, I could feel the individual PR person kind of banking on that we are sort of friends, and that's going to hopefully, from their perspective, color the opinion or at least mitigate some bad opinion. Like, I hate this thing, but I don't want to set you on fire because we're buddies, right?
No, and I mean, I so for what it's worth, I think that's maybe one of those areas where relationships can come in handy, where I mean, I don't know. I still think, especially now, it's really easy to write an article about a game. If it's going to get clicks and it's negative, maybe that's the best way to go about it. Sorry, Daisy's licking her ass on your stream. That's very nice of her to do. So sometimes that still happens, but I've definitely had situations where I've been trying to get somebody to cover a game, and then they'll come back and go, I took the time, I looked at it. I don't think it's something you are going to want me to write about because it won't be very positive. And I go, okay, well, I guess thanks. At that point, maybe it's helpful, but I'd say that's the exception rather than the rule.
Right. Why do you think the relationship aspect has diminished so much over the last 10 years, in my notice?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think social media is part of it. I think we're kind of expected to have relationships with kind of everybody that you interact with. It's like it feels like a pressure to respond to people, and like you're just looking at other people spouting whatever they're doing during their day. And again, I'm probably an exception to this, but like it feels all very surface level. It's very much like, okay, we interact and then we're gone. But if I actually wanted you to do something, I think it's something that a lot of people who have tried to, I guess, to use a shitty marketing phrase, I guess, is like mobilizing your audience. If it was like, if you wanted to get your friends to do something, it's like, oh, well, you want me to actually do something? Right. Then it just becomes, it's like, okay, no, I was cool to I was good with hitting the little heart next to your tweet or your Facebook post, but I don't necessarily want to do something for it. So I think that there's some element of that, but I don't know. Again, I mean, I think from our side, because there's so much noise, it's so easy to be ignored, or just kind of like fall into just one of all the people that are trying to contact you, trying to get something out of it. And to your point, I think it's really easy to fall into this, like the situation where you kind of interact with people while they're, let's say, even if you're a developer and you're trying to pitch somebody their game, you're contacting them, you're busy, you're like pitching it, and then when you're done, you're not necessarily, you have to really take the effort or make the effort to proactively reach out to people and go, hey, how are you doing? Just no reason. It seems like for the most, when I hear from people, it's, oh, hey, I heard you're working on this. Let's talk about this now. It's like, okay, I haven't heard from you in 3 years, so I guess, and that's fine. It is what it is. I don't think any of us can really have super close relationships with 1,000 people. But, I still think there's a pressure to feel like it's there. So, it's like, is that a real relationship if you're really just kind of hearing from people here and there and doing this perfunctory sort of, I hit like on your stuff so I exist kind of thing.
Right. Is that, I mean, is that, how much of a factor did that play into the development of terminals? And like, because for those of you who aren't familiar, and correct me if I'm wrong, but terminals.io is um, an outlet point for media and press and streamers to access game review codes or copies for their publication. Um, it's like back in my day, I used to have to write you an email and say, "Hey, how's it going? I heard you're working on this game, even though we haven't talked in 3 years. Give me code now, please. Thanks. Where's code, please?"
Yep. Yeah, and you know what? So when we originally developed terminals, and still this is kind of the case, is like we built it to try to make our lives a little easier and to try to automate, I guess, some of the common things that we were doing that were taking up a lot of time but weren't necessarily adding value. So it's like just distributing review keys or something like that. There's no reason that someone can't just go, instead of me sending literally, I mean, with a popular game, we'll send out 2,000 review keys. That means, okay, in an old system, it's 2,000 emails that I'm sending and or responding to. Even if those take me 2 minutes on average to send, that's 4,000 minutes. It's a lot of time, essentially. Whereas now in terminals, I can go, here's the link. Somebody goes there, I get 2,000 requests. I can hit select all, approve, boom, I'm done. So that sort of thing makes it easier. But we did originally, I mean, when we originally designed it, the goal was that it would free us up to spend more time doing individual contacts, reaching out to people, kind of ongoing relationship management. But that was about 5 years ago that we launched the site. And I think in that time, this sort of, maybe depersonalization of things has escalated a little bit more. And I think that even though we set it up in a way that would make it easier for us to spend more time on those personal relationships, I do think it's made it less personal overall. We just, by nature, you're not interacting as much. So that is something I think we've lost a little bit of that there, and I think we'll work on trying to build that back into the site in a way where it's a little more, give us a little more ability to kind of personalize the outreach and do a little more through the site that isn't just, hey, here's an opportunity and come to us. But at the same time, I don't know if that's a thing that's all that important. I mean, it's important, but I think that it, in a lot of cases, as I'm saying, a lot of times it's that press or influencers just, they want a review key, and that's at the end of the day, that is a big part of the relationship is you're a gatekeeper. I want access to this game. Give it to me. So in that way, is like, are we overcomplicating things by saying, how about you talk to me and we make sure that we exchange pleasantries and then I'll give you a code?
Right.
It's like, no, I just click the button, say request one, and I'll hit approve and we're done. And then you got what you wanted and maybe I got what I wanted. So I don't know. It's tough to say.
I mean, the back and forth pleasantries, to my understanding, was always, hey, I have a website. Here's my published work. I'm not just a random person who just wants free game keys. Because at the end of the day, these are essentially a currency in the press world. Not just for being the free game itself, but that is your lifeline to having published articles and getting your payday. How then, if you're going for a sort of more automated system, do you weed out the random people who have no real intention of because oh god, what's Keymailer? We've used Keymailer, and man, I've seen the people who apply for our games there, and it's I see you're a YouTube channel with 500 Minecraft videos. What do you want our weird indie narrative game for? You're never going to publish anything about it. I know this. Yeah. So what are the checks and balances that you guys use in terminals?
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that I think we're continually developing and trying to make better. But that was a big part of one of the driving factors in why we did this. Because like I said, we have 30,000 contacts in that system, and for what it's worth, we verify manually every single contact that comes in to make sure that they're producing content, that they meet a certain size requirement. So I think right now it's like 500 subs on YouTube, or same thing, followers on Twitch, or media outlets have a certain size requirement as well, and that they've been producing content, period. People then get to select their tags and all this kind of stuff, and basically say what they're interested in, what kind of platforms they cover, all this kind of stuff. But it is still hard for us to kind of vet when you have 30,000 people. It's like, okay, who do we really hit? And that's where, I still kind of see any of the key distribution platforms. It's like this. The purpose of that side of it is to make sure that keys get out there, and that people who are interested have an opportunity. I think the value of a review key, I guess, in that way is diminished in the last few years. We definitely try to keep an eye on things and see if somebody is, abusing the system, or they're requesting keys and not covering games, or, it seems like they're just kind of there to scam things. So we try to keep an eye on that, but inevitably people will slip through the cracks. People will get keys that they shouldn't get. And that's where it's not feasible to just offload all of that work, all of that decision making onto a machine. So we built terminals again with the goal of helping us do our job a little bit better, so that it's still like, okay, it's easy for us to get the keys, or get the requests, but then it's a more work on our side to go through those requests, make sure that you're a legitimate fit, that there's a reason to follow up once you actually, once we've given you the key, follow up and make sure you follow through on coverage, all that kind of stuff. So it's making one part of it easier, but kind of introducing other challenges, I guess, into the job.
Right. Is there anything you think makes terminals and your guys' method of handling this system different or better than Curator Connect or Keymailer or any of the there's a lot of these sort of systems that have kind of cropped up in the last while. What makes it stand out?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that part of it is that really, like, we didn't build terminals necessarily as a key distribution platform. Mm-hmm. It is part of it. The way that I think we envisioned it, and the way that we'll continue to develop it, is to think of it more like let's say, like Adobe Creative Suite, or Office Suite for video game PR. It's like, it is a key distribution platform, but it's also how we build our user list. So I can go into terminals and go, all right, I want everyone in our system in North America who has a reach of X, who says they're interested in strategy games on PC. And I can pull that list and get 8,000 names and go use that to contact them. We're developing stuff like our coverage tracking tools, automated coverage tracking, so that we don't have to spend all our time going out and doing Google searches and all that kind of stuff, as well as offering a way for other developers to kind of come in and use our platform. We do verify, like I said, every contact, so at least in that way it's a little different. But we're really trying to, it's also, again, how we send out our news. So I don't, admittedly, I don't really pay attention to what other platforms are doing and the features that they have, but ours is kind of like, if you want information on this game, we want to help connect you with the game, make sure you get news if you're interested in it, have access to potentially developers through the platform. It's a way for us to interact. It's a way for us to interface, more so than just come to get keys. Although at the end of the day, most of the people that use the site are people who are just coming, hey, I want some keys. But at the same time, we're able to send out press releases. We're able to engage with people through, if you're really into the game, into a certain game, we can keep you updated with whatever. I mean, it can be kind of like a supplement to your kind of Steam page news and all that kind of stuff. So that helps. But as we move forward, we're going to probably spend a lot more time developing different features that will, I suppose, kind of differentiate it a little bit. I think we want to make sure that we're useful to developers as well as the media and influencer side. And I think we're going to end up doing some things that are probably, a little challenging for our business. Stuff like allowing, I mean, we already do this, allow people to basically unsubscribe from certain clients or certain games and never hear about it again. Whereas developer will go, but I want you to email them about it. It's like, they said they didn't want it. So
right.
here we are, right? So stuff like that, and email digests to basically go, hey, I don't want a press release when it goes out. I want all of the press releases you send at the end of the week.
Right.
Which from a client perspective or developers are like, fuck, now I can't, my game news isn't going to get out on Tuesday when it's supposed to, but we're really trying to make sure that it's a pleasant experience for the people on the other end, so that it's, you're getting 100 emails a day. If we can help you cut that down to, whatever, 40, 50, I'd be happy to do that,
Right. It is. I mean, it's I think an inevitable solution to the increase in overall influencers, streamers, press, media people, and the increase in games and matching those audiences. At some point, it can't be a human oriented system anymore.
Yeah. So that's, I think ultimately what we want to be able to do, and through terminals, the goal is going to be to allow our teams, and ultimately we will likely open terminals up to external developers. I think the main concern we have is that some dude shows up and sends an offensive email to our entire database would be a problem, and then suddenly everybody unsubscribes and we've got issues. So that's probably the main hurdle right now, is trying to figure out how we'll do that. But the ultimate goal, I think, is to allow our team to more easily figure out who the people are that they should be talking to, who should get review keys for games, really try to filter out the noise, and same way on the user side, on the media and influencer side, to be able to go, you know what, I only care about this type of game, so I don't want to hear about anything else. And I think that, trying to appreciate the fact that we're all humans with limited time, limited attention, and the last thing we need is more emails, more stuff being thrown at us, more sales pitches for things that we just like have no interest in whatsoever. So if we can fix that a little bit, I think we'll have achieved our job a little bit.
You mentioned sort of developer expectations with systems, and then also sometimes a bad email or something can send things horribly awry. PR is, the origins of PR was often in crisis management. Yeah. Right, like that, like old school PR. That's really where it came down to. And so I do want to ask a bit about how much of that is still a focus for you guys and for other PR studio agencies.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's been something that we've actually just been talking about a fair bit internally at the company in the last couple months. I think it really depends on the clients that you're working with. I think that, when we see requests for proposals and stuff from really big companies, large corporate entities, or big AAA studios and things like that, the concerns around crisis comms are much higher. A lot more people are, there's a lot more worry that you're going to get yourself into trouble, and you spend, I think there's more urgency to be preventative, and really try to understand what potential issues might exist and how you're going to deal with them. Whereas I think what we end up seeing with, especially, social media is part of this challenge here, is that you can say the wrong thing you just say the wrong thing, period, and just don't perfectly consider every potential perception of how that's being heard, and who's going to see it, who might retweet it. You may be talking. It's like being in a corner at a party and telling your friend a joke, and then suddenly somebody from across the room comes running up and goes, "That's offensive."
The music dims at the wrong time.
And you're like, I wasn't even talking to you, and now you're here, and social media just makes that much easier, right? Is you could just say something to somebody that you're like, this person will be fine, but then it gets retweeted, and then 2 years later, suddenly you're like, oh man, I'm in this like shitstorm of things. So I think that what we see with a lot of indie studios is you just like it's things that you would have a really hard time predicting as a problem, and then suddenly somebody says the wrong thing or implements a feature that hasn't been truly considered and filtered. And actually, I guess, I mean, that's a good thing to kind of touch on is that I think something that we've brought to the table in a lot of cases is developers, especially like European developers or people who are not I mean, it could be a North American developer putting something in their game that is offensive to somebody in another territory. They don't know. It's a cultural issue. It's just something that they're total blinders on, and then suddenly becomes a big controversy. And the same thing happens the other way, where I think that North America is a much, it's a much harder place to, I don't know, there's much more focus on political correctness than there is in Europe. And not to a fault or anything like that, but that's just a cultural difference where a lot of developers in Europe will just not have any clue that what they're putting in their game could be offensive to someone. And then we as PR agencies or PR representatives have to go, hey, this feature that you have in your game could be perceived in the wrong way by certain people, and we think you should fix it. And that's our job, to bring that to the table. And if they go, no, we're not going to fix it, then we have a call to make. And we have parted ways with projects because we just didn't think it was going to be something that would reflect well on us. Right. But that's important, I think, is that we make sure that particularly in-game content is kind of vetted to make sure it doesn't offend people or isn't handled inappropriately. But a lot of times when crisis comes up, developers say one thing and then they try to cover it up or they try to fix it, and they just keep digging themselves further and further into a hole. And really at this point, it's like, if you say something wrong and you start to see that kind of storm coming, stop, find somebody who knows how to do this kind of thing, and we can talk you out of it. It's not a matter of trying to spin something. If you're legitimately did something wrong, it's not like, let's make up lies to pretend like it didn't happen. It's like, you've dug yourself into this hole. How do we get you out of it? Right. In a genuine way, right? It's not like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, and then the next day you're still doing the same thing. That's ineffective. I think our job is to say, all right, do this, this, and this, and commit to it, and hopefully you can get yourself out of this in a year or two or whatever.
Right. I mean, teaching an indie developer who's made problematic tweets or something how to apologize properly, or make amends for whatever social mistakes or social faux pas have been committed is, I think, one side of crisis management. But then there's also, like, I think a part of the PR media relationship that can create its own crisis in terms of player expectations and people see glowing reviews, and then suddenly the product is not to what they were led to believe, and then you've got another type of crisis on your hands. And I'm curious how you reconcile that as a PR agency. Your job is to get journalists excited about a product, but then when they get too excited about the product, it kind of creates an issue.
Yeah, we might have a little experience with that with a few projects that we've worked on in the last year or two. But I think that the key there is really that we have to be, we still have to be humble. We have to be honest. I think that where you get yourself into real problems is if you are intentionally deceptive, and you're trying to twist the truth. If you're doing what I think that a lot of people would say is like spin or something like that, I think one of the challenges that we face on the PR side, especially in the agency situation, is that we don't really see a game as close up, and we're not as ingrained in the development process as a developer would be. And so we don't necessarily know that something is a problem, or ultimately we are also given, I mean, we're hyped up in the same way, and we're seeing the same assets, we're seeing the same content from the game that media will see.
Right.
And I think that any respectable PR representative would probably agree that, like, if you see something going awry, like if you're playing a game and you're like, man, this sucks, and then you're going into your email and going, this game is amazing, everybody should play it. I think that that's a problem, and that's
You'll
something that
burn
we
your
would never.
relationships out in no time doing that anyway.
This doesn't make, and then I can't, like I said before, it's like in this relationship economy or whatever it is right now, for me to say no, you really really should play that, and then somebody plays it and goes, why the hell did you tell me to play this, it's trash. That's not going to help me in the long run. The next time I tell you something is worth your time, you're not going to pay attention. You're really not going to care. So that's something that, like, we have to be realistic, and I think that if you're just willing to kind of gloss over the truth or totally twist it, you're probably not going to be in this for a long time, because people will see through it. You're going to ruin a reputation. You're going to have problems. And I mean, we see that happen all the time. I mean, at this point, thankfully, I think I've been doing this for 20 years and haven't had really problems with that. And I think that's part of it, is that I can, I think, pretty authoritatively say that, I've never sent an email and been like, this is amazing, if I didn't believe it. Mm-hmm. And so maybe there is a bit of spin on it where you're like, hey, you should play this game, versus you really really should play this game, it's great. Or it's trying to not be too prone to hyperbole, and kind of, I think that when we know we're working on a game that is not amazing, our pitch is probably somewhat clear in that fact. We're not like, this is amazing, you should play it. It's like, hey, here's a game, enjoy. So I think it's pretty important to be genuine, but I think the same goes for really any career, but certainly in ours, our reputations are fairly important.
Right. The way you described the issue is it brought to light something that I'd never totally realized, is that, yeah, PR individuals typically get the same media as the press, right? It's not necessarily a matter of PR people hyping it up too much. But I'm curious how we fix or reconcile the issue of the people who do know what the game actually is, the developers, are saddled with NDAs, right? They can't speak freely about the game. They can't be honest and interpretive about the game. And then the people who can be open and talk about the game have this hyper-controlled set of media that they've been exposed to. How do we get to more honesty?
I've thought about this a fair bit. Like, I think it's hard to say, because at the end of the day, social proof is what's going to kind of make or break the situation at come launch time or something like that, right? Once things are in people's hands, there's no more secrets. Everything works the way, or as it should. So something that's terrible will get trashed for being terrible. Something that's great will get lauded for being great. But I think about it in terms of like film or something like that. How many times have we watched a movie trailer 6 months from launch and been like, oh my god, that looks amazing, and then when the movie comes out, you're like, that was terrible. It's tough, I guess. I mean, we're marketers, so it's something that it is our job to kind of get people interested, but to be honest about it, because if you're being deceptive, then you're going to have this disconnect between expectations versus reality, and you don't want to get into those situations, because I think it's important when you're marketing anything that you're establishing the appropriate expectations, because if you don't, people are going to come in, be disappointed. They're going to see something that they didn't expect, and that'll be a problem as well. So part of it is like, yeah, we want to hype something up, but it's kind of like, that's the job. And then you hope that by the time, I think, the challenge is like with reviews or something like that, pre-release reviews, that stuff can always be a little more challenging to deal with when press are jumping into a product under tight situations or tight guidelines of what they can do, and you see kind of disparity in review scores ahead of launch and stuff like that, and a lot of people talking about, hey, press are in on this, and this is this big conspiracy to make a game look better than it is, but it's not really how it goes. It's just kind of like, for the most part, we try to hype up a game because that's our job, and you try to show it in the best possible light. Nobody is going to spend like 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years of their lives making a game and then go, you know what, this thing sucks, but please enjoy. So you're trying to hype it up. So I don't know. I think I have a hard time with it. I don't know if there is a solution other than you could be totally honest and just let people see the product before it's out. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. I'd be curious to know if you have.
I mean, we've taken a pretty drastically different approach. Like we've worked with like Tinsley PR, and we've had the whole kit and caboodle from top to bottom on PR, and now I stream my game development. We have a Discord where our core fans are engaging with the content and seeing everything ahead of time. Our reach hyper minimized, but I think the opening the channels for developers. This is I'm the type of person who can handle that bandwidth and have the interest in it and the for that discussion. But for the most part, yeah, it's pretty tough. But sidestepping having spokespeople for your game and speaking on it itself has been our strategy.
Yeah, overall. And I think that works. Like, if we could get AAA game devs and stuff to be open about development, I think it would be pretty cool. There's a lot of concerns around, a million different issues.
Yeah, we also don't have like $40 million on the line with every game, right? Like,
so I think it's tough. I think that as long as consumerism is healthy, people want to get hyped up about stuff, and I think that I think maybe that's part of the consideration is like, even admittedly, for every game that is hyped up and that comes out and then people go, oh man, this is trash, I hate it, there are a bunch of people who loved it. So that to me is also hard, right? Like, because I think that anytime you're marketing something, you want to, ideally, you're showing it in a genuine way. You're showing exactly the product that you're going to present. You're trying to get people excited about what you're delivering. Maybe some people won't like it. Maybe some people will. But that's also the nature of art, I guess, and really any product. So I don't know how much of an issue there is. I think as long as you're being genuine and adhering to some ethical principles to make sure that you're really not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. I don't know if there's a huge issue with it, but I think certainly from our side, we're trying to be as clear as we can and try to be as honest as we can. And it's worked out so far. And we haven't thankfully been put into too many situations where we've had to even consider going, well, let's just lie about this and just, make up some kind of story and tell people this thing's better than it is. But it comes up where clients are like, I remember one of the first times I ever got yelled at my first job was because an outlet gave a game an 8 out of 10 and they were like, we should have got a 9 out of 10. And I was like getting reamed down. I was like, they're like, go tell them, contact them and let's get that changed. This is terrible. I'm not going to do that. So, yeah.
Right. It is a fascinating world. I guess before we go, do you have one piece of advice for fresh indie devs who are, just doing it themselves? What can an individual do right now to up their game by 2%?
Yeah, sure. I think it goes back to some of the stuff that we've been talking about. At its core, it's find the specific people that you want to hit. Like, your target market is an easy, like, marketing term is like, but find your target market. If you're making a strategy game, find strategy gamers, whether they're press. The way I'd see it is that press, influencers, whatever, they're gamers. They want to be excited about things. So if you give them something that they want to be excited about, they'll get excited. And so I think, to your point about your open development, I don't think there's such a thing as talking to people too early. Starting, I think that the way the industry works now, it's start talking to people when you have an idea. Just start planting that seed, so that by the time you're ready to talk, they're interested and they're sold on your idea. The way I kind of recommend a lot of developers approach this is to think about your marketing campaign like a train line, or like a metro line, a bus line, whatever you want to call it, where every activity you do is another stop, on another station, whatever you want to call it. So every time you do something, you have the opportunity, whether that's doing a stream, whether that's posting something on Twitter, whether that's putting out a news push, getting reviews, going to an event, doing a beta, whatever. Those could all be stations. If you only have 3 of those things, if you have, I'm announcing my game and I'm going to release a trailer and I'm going to launch my game, you better hope that everybody gets on board at those times. Otherwise, by the time you get to launch, you're going to have an empty train. So the way I would look at it is build more stations, put more activities in, like do 1,000 different things, see what sticks, invest more time, more money, whatever it happens to be, in the things that are working. And then hopefully you'll connect with people. But at the end of the day, it's like, make good games, I think, is probably the biggest thing. I mean, it's right. Easy, the easy part.
Easy.
Make magic, and make people care. But once you have something good, it's about putting it in the right people's hands, and the only way they can do that is by seeing it, and by finding out about it. And there's a kind of this like notion that things don't sink in until somebody's seen it like 10 times. So the first time somebody sees a trailer, they might see it and they might go, that's cool. Second time, maybe. Third one they might miss because they weren't online that day. Fourth thing they might see, and then finally by 5th, 6th, 7th time, they're like, oh yeah, I remember this game, and I'm going to start paying attention to it. But if you've only done that one announcement, and then they drop a new Call of Duty trailer that day, and that's the only thing you had planned, and your whole campaign was resting on that day going well, right. You're going to be a world of hurt,
Right. Yeah, no, there's something to be said about being remembered rather than being noticed. I have seen a difference in what that means.
For sure. I'd rather have, I think anybody creative should be looking at it this way. It's like, it's better to have 1,000 people who totally love what you do than to have 100,000 people who you barely register on their kind of radar, and you're just kind of in the periphery. It's like, if you can get those 1,000 people, you can probably get to 1 million. You can probably get to 2 million. But if you can't get a small group of people excited, then try something different, make a different game. Maybe it's just not the right fit, right? So.
Right. Well, I want to thank you a whole lot for coming on and talking in the world of PR and marketing. It's been a lot of fun. If I want to bring my $2 million marketing campaign to you, how do I reach you guys?
Yeah, just hit us up at evolve-pr.com, or on Twitter. I'm Evolve Tom or Evolve_PR. Wherever. We're pretty easy to find, or go to terminals.io, whatever it happens to be. We're around.
Righteous. All right, guys, that's going to be it for the show. Thank you again for coming on. I'm going to throw you on Thanks for Walking, and I think Riggy's working right now, so let's go and we'll see what he's building right now. But bye, guys. See you later.
Yeah.